Hello, and welcome to week 3 of our discussion for information literacy. First thing I want to do is start out by saying, according to course guidelines, historians must be honest and objective in their research and must be dedicated to a reasoned investigative reconstruction of primary sources. Uh, Today's topic is actually going to talk about the Religious Society of Friends, or Quakers, and the slave trade. I found a few documents that spoke, obviously, of the slave trade and the Quakers, but two of them were, more of a generalization, and then one was written by a Quaker himself, Anthony Benezet. Um, so the first article I found was the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting at the or the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, in September 14th, 1754. So this article, or this whole document, was actually like basically meeting notes from the yearly meeting that the Quakers had. Now, the Quakers originally came to the colonies as slave owners. A lot of them did own slaves, but early on into being in the colonies, they realized that being a slave owner went against their religious ideas. So they quickly started, not only speaking out publicly against slavery, but also speaking out against their own people that owned slaves, and quickly turning that around to free the slaves that they owned and try to abolish slavery in the colonies. The yearly meeting, document that I did find did talk about, was basically about promoting and purchasing of the slaves. And one of the members in this meeting specifically, said, quoted, "Now, dear friends, if we continually bear in mind the royal law of doing to others as we would be done by, we shall never think of bereaving our fellow creatures of the valuable blessing liberty. None endure to grow rich by their bondage." So they knew early on that liberty was a big thing for not just themselves and the colonies, but for the slaves that they were, or the slaves that were in the colonies, and they needed to stop the purchasing of the slaves to help, abolish the slavery overall. One of the documents I did find was actually by a Quaker named Anthony Benezet. He talked about this idea, of abolishing slavery. He was one of the first founders of an anti-slavery society, and the society was called Society for the Relief of Free Negroes Unlawfully Held in Bondage. He was very early on an abolitionist, so he really focused on his main ideals of Quakerism, which was peace and, um, nonviolence, and being free, being liberated, basically. One of the things he said in this document was, "I'm sorry to say it, in which we as a nation are deeply engaged, which is such a nature as that nothing can be more inconsistent with the doctrines and practices of our meek Lord and Maker, nor stained within a deeper dye of injustice, cruelty, and oppression. I mean the slave trade, the purchasing and bringing the poor Negroes from their land, and subjecting them to a state of perpetual bondage." So he's very against owning and having these slaves, having slaves in general. Again, it went against his religion and everything that he spoke of. The third article I found was called "A Poetical Epistle to the Enslaved Africans in the Character of an Ancient Negro." Um, it again was kind of like a meeting note of the Quakers. And one of the things that stood out in this was, um, that they really did focus on the African slave being born in Africa and or born in Pennsylvania, but not being liberated, and instructing them to be useful in learning. So, like, but learning in a Christianity way. So they believe that, the slaves not only could be liberated or freed, but they could also be, taught the way of Christian lives. So those are the things I found during the, search in the, database, and very interesting. I actually also did my blog this week on this topic as well, because I found a lot of very interesting things, in the databases that we were researching this week. So thank you for listening.